We noticed that one of the main focuses that I've been working on is trying to create these pages to be as dynamic as possible. We've looked at corners, we've looked at drop shadows. If I start applying corners and drop shadows to here, I can really start making some beautiful pages. You notice that because I've been using percentages and a mix of pixels, I can actually start making some fluid page designs. So that really is my goal about making beautiful, fluid, dynamic pages. And we've actually looked at simulating depth. We haven't looked at creating depth. And this is what we're going to talk about next. The next portion is actually the use of layers. It's really one of the most powerful things about CSS3 that we're able to play with. And it's actually available in other versions of CSS, but it's really refined here. And one of the most important things is being able to add things on top of each other. How does that work? Well, I'm going to show you right now. The first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to go back to my HTML and I'm going to create at the bottom, or I could also do it at the top. In this case, I think I'm going to use it at the top. I'm going to create an empty div. And maybe for fun, why don't we use our contact div or a dialog div? Maybe you know what, I'll decide. How about this? I'm a little fickle today. I'm going to create a dialog div. And so imagine we're going to make a little box on top of everything else. So I'm just going to call it box because I'm kind of funny, and I'm going to say hello world for any engineers out there, software guys. Guess what? Hello world. I'm going to do a hello world box. I load it in the top. I hit reload my page. It shows up. I'm actually going to make it a really, really annoying color. Again, I'm going to put my box right here. I'm going to take a most annoying color that I have. So I'm going to make my background color. I can actually even use a background image, but let's use a background color. And I'm going to use that 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. And to really, really make it as annoying as possible, I'm going to use my typical border code that everyone knows and loves. Background border 1 pic solid red, so that I can see it from a mile away. By the way, if you ever want to use that trick, feel free to use it. You can say, Adrian said, use his border technique. There you go. There's a nice annoying box, but that's not where I want it. I want my box on top. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to use 3 pieces of syntax. The first one is going to be position. The second one is going to be a z-index. And the one after that is going to be left, top, bottom, right. And these are for positioning. So the first thing I'm going to do is I need to rip it out of this world of being able to stack things. So what I have to do is I actually am going to use the position tag. And so the goal of the position tag is to be able to change the position of where this div is. This works on other pieces of code, but I really, really suggest, how about say, we'll make it mandatory. Use it on a div. Because the div is empty, because the div doesn't have any of these characteristics with it, it's not a paragraph tag, it's not a span tag, it's just a div and it's empty, and I'm inherently rewriting its world, I'm going to rewrite that div. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to take this div and I'm going to say position is absolute. It loads up right here. I reload the page, and of course, now you notice the page is overlapped. The hello world is on top of my contact div. Not the most helpful thing in the world. So how about we make it look like a little dialog box? So I'm going to come up here. I'm going to give it a height. That's pretty cool. We all remember our height. We all remember we'll make up 100 pixels. I'm going to give it a width. So let's make it 250 pixels. Let's reload this. Whoa, that's one big box. And it actually is trying to be at 100%. So let's maybe not 250. Let's make it just 200. Let's save it. Let's see what's going on. And I'll tell you why it's broken right now. The one thing that is broken is I still need to actually make it into a layer. It's also broken because I forgot a semicolon right here. So we fixed it, but we also have to layer things. So I'm going to use the second technique is to actually create a layer from this. And this is what's called a z-index. So I'm going to actually enter a new line, and I'm going to use the code z-index. You notice it pops up, and z-index is from 0 to 99. I actually think about 1 to 99, but it's pretty much 0 to 99, 0 being the flattest. If I wanted a box that was on top of everything that's superseded, and what we'll do is we'll create a second box to overlap them, I'm going to set that to 99. I'm going to reload the page. Of course, nothing happens because there's only one layer on top. So now let's use our third piece of this characteristic is let's use position. So I'm going to create my semicolon so I don't forget again, and I'm going to use left, and this is going to be 200 pixels. I'm going to use top, 400 pixels. Of course, we need a semicolon. It's those little mistakes that get you when you're not looking. I hit save, and now I reload, and I probably threw this box all the way down here. Not the most helpful box. Let's take a look at where this is. Let's make sure, I think maybe because I have the screen zoomed in, it actually throws it down there. But you now notice I have a box that's overlaying everything. Don't believe me? Well, why don't we do this? Why don't I use opacity at 0.5, reload it, and now you can tell that I have one box overlying everything, and it's dynamic. So other things are scrolling up above it. If I actually bring this to 100%, you now notice where this box lies. You can see it had 400. But let's even take this further. Let's add more on top of it. So one of the things I'm going to do is, why don't I go in, I'm going to add in another box. Maybe let's say do a box on top of it, and let's call it box 2, and it'll say, hello world, me too. I'm going to reload this page. Of course, it drops up because there's not anything in the style sheet. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to take this code, I'm going to copy it, I'm going to use a z-index of 2. For some reason, I could use 98, or I could have set them from 1 to 2. And I'm just going to drop this in. Maybe let's use the background color of 2, 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, blast off. I'm going to reload it. And now you notice I have one box on top of another box. So why don't we take this box? I'm going to shift this to 150. I'm going to shift this to 300. Let's reload the page. Let me zoom in. Of course, the box is a little bit the same width, so I really want to have some real overlap. So let's do 225. There you go. Now I have one box overlapping another. Let's even change the transparency of the bottom box. And now we have true layers on top of each other. It's really, really cool. The z-index, again, is really powerful. One of the things that I can also do itself is I've been using position absolute, which is position is everything, or meaning I have to position the box exactly where I want it. It's absolute to the 0, 0 index here. If I actually wanted to create a box that only overlaid within this div that was from here, I can actually use position relative. And relative is relative to where it is in the HTML. So I'm going to save it. Let's see what happens. Of course, remember where I said the div is above, the div is back up here, and in the position of ordering, it's actually above this area. If I wanted to make it relative to under the nav, under the menu, I can save it, I can reload it, and now the position is relative to under the menu. Again, a little bit more annoying because it begins to take up and push the other divs. But what we want to do is really think about the design intent. Is it absolute? Is it relative? I'm going to put it back, and I'm going to show you a third one, and this is referred to as position fixed. The issue with absolute is you notice that the position and relative is that it actually stays with the page. It's absolute to the 0, 0 of the page itself. What if I didn't want that box to move and I wanted that box to get fixed even if I scrolled? This is where I can use the position fixed. I come back here to my browser, I reload, and you now notice I can't I can't do anything because I'm not actually scaled in. So I'm going to zoom in so you guys can see it. There you go. This is now the page is scrolling. You notice that even with the page scrolling, those two boxes are fixed. You might ask me, hey Adrian, why would I ever use this? If you've ever gone to a web page and you've seen where the footer or the header is actually fixed and you can scroll and the header stays on top, so you always look at the navigation and the logo, that's the use of a high z-index, also the use of position fixed, and the positioning might be set to 0, 0. Again, a really exciting, a lot of fun, but you now know that there's an amazing power of being able to create not just perceived dynamic, perceived depth, but real depth in a web page. And I can also get away from blocky things. Imagine if I rounded these corners, I can now make circles that float on top of the page. So this is the power of adding positioning and changing with the layout in our divs.